Welcome to episode 16 of the Yes You Coaching podcast. My name's Anna Manning, and I am your host and the owner and founder of Yes You Coaching. And today we're going to be talking about acknowledging yourself. Now, anyone who has been a client or who is a client may give a little chuckle to themselves now because they know that I am always asking them at the end of every session that they have with me, what would you like to acknowledge yourself for? Now, this isn't a question that we typically get asked in our day to day life, is it? I don't think before I did coach training that anyone had ever actually asked me this question. But when I was learning to become a coach, one of the things that they taught us was that at the end of a session, it was a good idea to ask somebody what they'd like to acknowledge themselves for. And the idea of this is that you kind of getting somebody to think, okay, what is it that I've done? What is it that I've put out there? What is it that I've achieved? And let me take a minute to pause and think about that. It's really important to do it because it helps you to recognize what you've actually done and it gives you motivation to do more. So, with that in mind, I started asking at the end of every coaching session. And there's a lot of things that I got taught in coach training that maybe I don't do exactly the same anymore, but this one stuck. So, all about acknowledging yourself today. And if you're like, what the hell does she mean? What is that question? Because sometimes the first time I ask it, people just kind of look at me with a slightly blank or confused face. They're like, can you put that another way? Yes, I can put it another way. I mean, what would you like to give yourself a pat on the back for? What would you like to recognize yourself for? Most people get it at this point. Some people continue looking at me like a rabbit in the headlights and they're like, nothing? Well, okay, we'll get there. If this is a question that you've never been asked before because you haven't been coached by me, then it can feel a little odd. It can feel a little foreign, a bit unfamiliar. And I know, because I've asked it to so many people, that for some people it feels really uncomfortable. So we're going to dive into all that today. And maybe I'm going to encourage you to think about whether you do acknowledge yourself for stuff, whether you do give yourself a pat on the back for stuff, for who you are, for what you do, for what you achieve, for when something's worked well. Like, do you naturally do that as part of your everyday life? I think most people don't. And I'd like to see people doing it more. I have an agenda here. I really would like to see people doing it more. I didn't used to, and now I do. And I find it a really nice part of my life that I don't have to look necessarily to somebody else for some praise or some acknowledgement. That's nice, of course, but there's a source of praise and acknowledgement, and like there's a pat on the back for me all the time available. Me, right, 24/7 it's available to me to do that for myself. I'm not now. I'm like, why would I even wait for anyone else to do it? Now I just, you know, I said on my Instagram stories this week, first it feels really uncomfortable, then you get used to it, then you just can throw praise on yourself like confetti. And it has changed the way I feel inside and some of the ways that I do things. And the other reason that I think, and I know that it's really important to be able to acknowledge yourself for the stuff you do and learn to do that, is because I coach on confidence. And one of the things that I see with people when I start working with them on their confidence is that they're usually pretty shit at acknowledging the good stuff that they do. They're usually already fairly successful. They've done a lot of things. They've, demonstrated a lot of value. They have a lot of value. They are valuable, but they're kind of skipping over that. It's like that's sort of minimized or kind of papered over. And the stuff that they don't feel so good at or so confident in is maximized. So that's like blown up. that's like taking up a lot of time in their brain, a focus on, oh my God, I didn't get that right. I got that wrong. That wasn't as good as it could have been, etc., etc., etc. That gets a lot of airtime in their head. What doesn't get a lot of airtime is how good they are and how well they've done and everything that they've achieved, and even like small stuff that happens day to day that they really, if they were working in a team with somebody else, they'd really deserve acknowledging for those things. But they don't. And they don't give themselves that acknowledgement. So they're left with either a tiny bit of acknowledgement that they get from someone else or nothing. And I just think it doesn't have to be like that, you know? Everyone is like walking around in life and trying to do everything that they're trying to do their jobs and look after their homes and, do stuff for causes that they care about and walk their dog and sustain romantic relationships and parent their kids and right everything and you bring like your heart and soul to all of these things that you do, and I think you deserve a little bit of acknowledgement for that. Life's not easy, is it, all the time? It can be really hard being a human. You get a lot of, struggles and a lot of uncomfortable emotions and a lot of like quite tricky things that you have to deal with and you have to navigate in your life. And I think you deserve a bit of acknowledgement for doing all of that. I know I sound like I'm on a bit of a rant now, but I'm really serious about this. I don't think that you should miss this. I don't think you should miss seeing who you are and what you do and just be like, oh, well, that's just what's expected, isn't it? No. The fact that you get up every day, if you do, and you go and you do stuff and you try and, yeah, you probably fail a bit and then other times you succeed. And I think you deserve a bit of bloody acknowledgement for that. I listen to the stories that people tell me in coaching and I think, Jesus Christ, these people are fucking legends. And it's nice to be able to take a minute to acknowledge that. I know that was a bit of a rant. But I really want to press home this point that you deserve to be acknowledged. Absolutely deserve to be acknowledged. And you're a good person to do it because you're really intimately acquainted with all the cool shit that you do all the time. You might have been glossing over it. You might not have really been noticing it. But I want you to stop and take a pause and just think, what would I acknowledge myself for? And if your mind draws a complete blank, try it like this. If somebody else was like looking at a film of my life from today, what do you think they would acknowledge me for? Where would they be like, oh, yeah, you did a good job there. Yeah, that was a tricky thing to handle and you handled it. That was a difficult piece of work and you finished it. You really didn't want to do that thing and yet you went out and did it. This does not have to be anything grand. This can be any small thing. So what would you like to acknowledge yourself for? I have seen a change in my life since I started asking myself this question and actually acknowledging myself rather than expecting other people to acknowledge me for things that I do. Because let's face it, most of us like external acknowledgement, external validation. Most of us like to be recognized and acknowledged for the stuff that we do. And if you think about like modern like leadership and management stuff, it's always saying you should acknowledge people for what they do, you should thank people for what they do, right? And why do you think that is? It's because it makes people feel nice and it makes them want to do more good stuff for you, basically. But it also acknowledges their mere presence and their trying and what they have produced. It acknowledges like that they are there and that they are giving something a go. It like acknowledges their humanity. So yeah, it's a good idea because it's motivating, but it also it's like part of, I just think it's just a basic part of acknowledging the humans around you. Like we need that. We need to be acknowledged. Imagine if you were just ignored by everyone, even though you were there within your workplace doing really good work and you never got acknowledged for that. You'd think that was pretty bad. You'd be like, I'm over here, and you probably wouldn't want to express it like this, or you probably wouldn't express it like this because you might not even know what's going on. But you'd feel like, do you know what? Oh, I did a really good job there and I really tried and I really brought myself in that moment and no one even noticed. No one even cared. Well, if you're never giving yourself any acknowledgement, this is probably what's happening to you most of the time. We can't rely on validation from external sources. We might get it. So we might have a boss who is amazing at, recognizing our efforts and giving us validation. I had a CEO in my last role who was amazing at it. And I don't know whether she did it on purpose or whether it was just like a natural part of her. And like even late on a Friday night, you would get an email that would say, thank you for that thing that you sent me. And something about it or some detail that she'd noticed or just something. And she would acknowledge you. And do you know what? People cared about her a lot. And they would do stuff for her that I will bet they wouldn't do for other people because she acknowledged them and she recognized them for the person that they were and for what they were trying to do and for what they were doing. And it made them feel great and it made them want to do more. Now, you may have a CEO like that in your life. You may have a boss like that in your life, but you might not. Most people, once they get more senior, there's less and less and less of that. They're just kind of expected to get on, do their job, like, this is what you're here for, even though they're doing some pretty cool stuff all the time and hard stuff all the time. And this might be you. You might be thinking, do you know what? I don't really get a lot of sort of validation for what I do. And I'm kind of left wondering, like, am I doing a good job? Or not? Like, I don't know. I haven't got anyone telling me, so I'm kind of in the dark. It's like you have got somebody who can tell you. Your brain is definitely going to tell you every time you do a shit job. It's going to be like, oh, didn't do that so well, did you? Messed that up. Oh dear, you're in trouble there. Like, it's going to do that naturally. You're going to have to actually make the effort to show it the other side of the coin. To be the one that gives yourself validation. Like, the call is coming from inside the house. The call can come from inside the house. And if you're thinking, oh yeah, but validation from yourself isn't really that great, is it? I need it from outside. A lot of people tell me that. Like, why do you need it from outside? So often when I coach people on this, what it turns out is that they need it from outside because they'll assume that they're doing a bad job unless somebody tells them otherwise. If that sounds confusing, does that sound confusing? I don't know if that sounds confusing. So they'll assume that if someone isn't giving them validation, telling them they're doing a good job, that they're not doing a good job. They might be doing a really good job. They might just be in a senior position where you don't really get that kind of validation anymore. So work out, if this is you and you're like, yeah, I could do with a bit more acknowledgement, actually. I could do with a bit more validation for the stuff that I'm doing. Look in the mirror. There you are, 24/7, available for a praise pie. Available to throw yourself a compliment, give yourself a wink, acknowledge yourself for the stuff that you've done, pat yourself on the back for something that's happened. My life got a bit sweeter when I worked out how to do this. And when I worked out not how to do it, but like that I could do it. And that it was actually fairly easy. Now, if you're thinking, oh, well, I can't really give myself a praise or an acknowledgement. Oh dear, that's uncomfortable. You might be thinking, some of my clients tell me this, oh dear, I can't boast or be big-headed. You might be thinking, like, I can't, oh dear, no, acknowledge myself, oh dear, no. But you'd hardly think it was boastful or big-headed if somebody else acknowledged you for some good stuff that you'd actually done. You'd be like, yeah, cool, oh, thank you, yeah. Oh, I did do that. So what's the difference to doing it yourself? I think a lot of our conditioning has kind of taught us to be quiet and be humble and all of that. But I don't even think that this goes against that. This isn't like an attempt to pump yourself up for stuff you haven't done. This is simply an acknowledgement of the stuff that you have done. The things that you have faced, been through, all the rest of it. Like, bloody hell. I don't think there's a human walking the earth that doesn't get some acknowledgement for the things that they've seen, been, all of it. And trust me, my friend, I would not think you were any different if I met you. Even if you told me you really had nothing worth acknowledging, I'd be like, I roll up my sleeves. I'm actually wearing a t-shirt, so I can't do that. Not that you'd be able to see it anyway, but this month I hit I give myself like a financial goal for the business every month, and I hit my goal this month. And you might have, if you're on Instagram, you might have seen it over on my Instagram stories. I literally like I'd written out this like sheet, and I was filling it in when I'd, you know, hit a certain financial milestone, because I'm quite visual. I like to see things like building. And I wrote, "Well done, Anna," and put like a flower on it. And I thought, you know what? That's what my primary school work used to look like when I was like 5 and 6. "Well done, Anna," like a tick and an exclamation mark and like a little gold star. And I was like, oh, I'm still 6. Yeah, I'm still 6. My brain is essentially still 6. Your brain is chemically wired the same way as it was when you were 6, which means that you get a little bit of dopamine when you see "Well done, Anna!" exclamation mark and a little flower or a gold star. Well, essentially, my brain still does the same thing now. When I saw that, I was like, yeah, well done, Anna. You might think this is ridiculous, but I don't, because I know that it works. And I know that it helps people to build and maintain their confidence. And I know that it could help you. So, will you acknowledge yourself for something today? Will you recognize an achievement, something you've been through, tough time that you've had, something you faced, something you finished, something you tried? Believe me, there are hundreds of things that you are deserving of acknowledgement for. I think of some kids like must be just crying out for acknowledgement that they just never get. They just never get. Maybe they have a parent that just doesn't know how to do it, or they think that withholding acknowledgement is a good idea. Motivate them by things never being good enough. Or maybe the voice in your brain is a little bit like that parent too. Maybe you think you'll motivate yourself by nothing ever being good enough and you never being acknowledged. And you think of that kid there, like wanting something, getting nothing. And essentially, that's like the same kid inside of you that wants some external validation from your boss and you don't get it. No one teaches kids to acknowledge themselves, really. Or maybe they do now. They're a bit more forward thinking in schools these days than they were when I was a kid. But you don't need it so much from external sources when you learn that this can be an inside job. You can be the one. You are the one. So, what would you like to acknowledge yourself for?